Okay, so with these weird releases, it's pretty easy to see why fans have a hard time finding the games in the series that they want to play. Combined with Capcom's lax advertisement of the games, as well as Capcom USA's annoying habit to focus on only one character from the series at a time, which was usually Morrigan, it's no wonder why the series has fallen to the wayside. However, with the recent success of Street Fighter IV and the subdued but profitable returns from Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, cross-generation of heroes and Ultimate All-Stars, Capcom, or rather silver-tongued hype man Yoshinori Ono, has considered the possibility of making a new Darkstalkers fighting game using similar 3D models and pairing them with 2D gameplay. This makes me uneasy for a number of reasons. Not because I'm one of those sprite purists, mind you, since I think that argument's a bit tired, but to be honest, Capcom has treated the Vampire series as if it was finished ever since Savior came out, and with good reason. They put a lot of work into the game, and gave most of the characters a solid ending to their individual stories, which normally wouldn't mean much, this being a fighting game series and all, except for the fact that this is one of the few series that Capcom has made any effort to try and maintain some sort of continuity with. So my impression of this series is that it's over and done with. Also, the fact that it was mentioned offhandedly in an interview about Super Street Fighter 4, as opposed to its own announcement, is worrying, especially since this is coming from Ono, who would say pretty much anything without thinking about it. And to complicate matters further, at this point in time, Capcom isn't really a fighting game company anymore. They're more like a video game company that puts out fighting games from time to time. Sure, they can still make them, but they don't live or die by every release like other companies do. They've been out of practice for a while, and most of the talent that worked on their best fighters have gone on to work with other companies. Their Street Fighter IV development team just went through the motions of teaching themselves how to make a 2D fighter with 3D models, and that was after going through all sorts of crazy ideas like mapping hitboxes directly onto the models instead of just using plain old hitboxes. They don't even have a set team for fighting games, they just have the one team for Street Fighter IV, and they outsource or co-develop everything else. Granted, A-Ting isn't a horrible developer, but up until recently their games usually lacked polish, especially their work in 2D. And Dimps is more or less at the same level as Capcom is right now, having only worked on one fighting game series up to this point, although that series still shows great promise. To be fair, it's not as if the company has completely forgotten about the series. Cameos are made from time to time, and not just by the resident sex symbol and furry bait. Characters like Dimitri, BB Hood, and Anakaris pop up from time to time in a number of crossovers, and four of the most popular characters were used in the fighting game mashup Capcom Fighting Evolution, although that game didn't do so well. And interestingly enough, that was Ono's premier role as producer, although it's not as if he's at fault for the game's lack of success, I think. Still, it would be hard to convince Capcom to make a new entry in a somewhat obscure series, and even if the company did consider it, they could make a bad game, or it could undersell, or even worse. It could be seen as a cash-in on the recent Twilight vampire craze, and trashed from all sides by anyone with a short fuse and an even shorter attention span. The only strength that the series has is a small, but relatively sane, fan base, lurking, playing over the net or in the few arcades that still have the games, and waiting for the faintest sign of life from the series to rise up as one and unite for the love of the game. Or something. I don't know. I don't know what could happen for sure. I'm no prophet, and despite the little bit of worrying that I just had, I don't pretend to know how these things work in the grand scheme of things. All I know is that this series is good overall, no matter what it's called, or how it's chopped up, moved around, or modified. The way that I see it, you could pick any game out of the overall series and you're bound to have a more enjoyable time with that entry than with most of the other 2D fighters that have been released in the past at that point in time, and depending on your tastes, even some of the more recent fighters out there. Due to the overall nature of this series, most people tend to get their stories mixed up. So this is one of those few games where I feel I not only can recommend it, but I should, just to set the story straight. So if you ever get a chance to play it at some busted up kiosk, or maybe you find a copy of Darkstalkers 3 on the ground or something, check it out. I'm just saying.